Hello, guys. Welcome to this new edition of Mind Podcast. This is Aadit Kapadia coming to you on yet another weekend. Happy New Year to everyone. We had a sort of strange. We usually take the last couple of weeks off in the year, but and so we had recorded one right before Christmas, and then New Year's happened to be on a Sunday as well. So here we are, wishing you a very late Happy New Year, 7 days later. But hope everybody has been having a wonderful New Year and stuff. And we're doing a continuation of two podcasts. So one, the last podcast that we did at Mindmakers, which was a wrap up of 2022, where we talked about everything that shaped the world in 2022. And I also did a podcast on my guest's channel, which will be uploaded on his channel soon. And this is a part two of that podcast as well. So without further ado, let me welcome my guest today on Mind Podcast. It's Anang Mittal. Anang has been a columnist, a fellow podcaster, has written about various issues on the Indo-American side, has been a consultant on the political side, on the American spectrum, and on the media side as well. So he's donned various hats, and he's here to talk to us about things that we enjoy talking about politics, but from an Indo-American perspective, what is happening here, and then we'll also talk a little bit about India. So the first part of the podcast was about India and what happened in India in 2022. The second part of the podcast is what happened to America in 2022, and then we'll sort of wrap up both the podcasts in this one. So welcome to Mind Podcast, Anand.
Thank you for having me, Aadit Bhai. Really, it's a pleasure to be here. And I think, as I mentioned before, we've been talking for so long, so it's great to
Yeah,
finally get together and do
finally,
something.
yes.
Yeah,
It took us only 5 years. I hope our next
yeah,
meet after this
for
is
sure, for
happens at a
sure.
shorter. But you know, to kick things off, Anang, I think we can both we can both agree that 2022 was a very remarkable year for American politics, because American politics, it was wondering that where is this going, right? Are we going into the Trumpian era with the Republican Party? On the Democratic side, is Biden still holding the straw, the old center of left guard, or is it going towards the squad or the far left in the Democratic Party? And it seems like both the wings of the party are in conflict with the more moderate wings of the party, or the more establishment wings of the parties, for want of a better word, right? And that sort of continued. Yet you saw a midterm election which gave out a remarkably centrist result, if I may say, where the Republicans held the control of the House, the Democrats held the control of the Senate, and people actually voted split party. Like in Georgia, Governor Kemp won with a remarkable margin, but Walker, who was endorsed by Donald Trump, struggled to win and eventually lost.
Yeah, it's actually been a very interesting year as far as American politics goes, because what you have is basically, the predictions of the giant red wave, the predictions of a massive Republican victory, myself included. I made those predictions, and you can go on my YouTube channel and see stuff from summer of 2022. But yeah, that red wave did not materialize, and is essentially the American public confirmed their trust, so to speak, in Joe Biden, and basically said to the Republicans that we don't trust you enough to govern, to give you full power. And this has actually been the seesaw. This kind of back and forth has been a constant since, I would say, since the last years of the Bush presidency. Because every time, I think the Iraq War kind of skewed elections back in the day. But I think right now what we're seeing since the 2008 election is essentially the American people realizing, because of the Obamacare, because of the Iraq War, the financial crisis, these three, and not just that, 9/11. I think the American people have basically realized that there's no use in giving singular power to one single party. And that's what we've been seeing back and forth, back and forth. So President Obama gets elected in 2008, almost 12 years ago. He loses the House in 2010, then loses the Senate in 2014. Then Trump wins in 2017, 2016, and then 2 years later, again, Trump loses in 2018. And so there's been this back and forth, because I think the American public, if we can say that the American public as a whole sort of leans in the middle, right? So it's a lot of independents and a few partisans on both sides. Then what's happened essentially is that corrective, again, but not too much of a corrective, so that the Republicans aren't just undoing everything Joe Biden has done. But then Joe Biden was only given 2 years to undo everything that the Republicans had done for the last 6 years. And so that's basically what's happened. And I think it's kind of I think this is something that Republicans especially need to come to terms with, which is that they do not have the trust of the American people currently. And so going into 2024, I don't think they're going to be able to turn things around in 2 years. And we can talk more about that, obviously, in terms of what's going to happen.
Hmm. Fascinating. So then let's look at a little go in a little deeper with basically with the whole scenario, right? Um, can we say that Donald Trump in the Republican establishment has taken a backseat now? Officially, that now I don't think the Republicans are ready to take on Donald Trump, but clearly, like, I don't think he has the same influence he did 2 years, 3 years ago.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. After the midterm the midterm
Hmm.
victory, the so-called victory, the sort of Pyrrhic victory, he announced his campaign for the 2024 presidency, which I think it's going to be a very much a long shot. He's most likely going to be the lead in terms of the primary race for 2024, but it still remains to be seen because nobody else has announced their for president yet on the Republican side, at least. And I think the long and short of it is that Donald Trump is still the nominal head of the Republican Party. You just former president. He's only been out of power for the last, three years. So in that sense, right, in the sense of like, there's no leader who has stepped forward so far. That he is still the leader of the Republican Party, but it's very obvious that many figures in the Republican Party basically no longer want anything to do with him. And I think that we're kind of in this knife's edge right now, trying to see where things will fall. I think most likely people are hoping that a figure rises from the Republican Party, so Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, or somebody else charismatic who will supplant Donald Trump and be able to give Republicans a victory. But it's still hard to say right now. Sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, what was interesting was that Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump started taking on Ron DeSantis in comments, right? So there is a slogan, and I forget what that slogan is, but essentially they say that if you don't want someone to be your opponent, the thumb rule is you never take on them, right, publicly,
Yes.
because now, whether we like it or not, he's elevated him as his number one competition.
Yes, by calling somebody out, then you are essentially marking them as your rival, your nemesis, and so that's kind of what's happening right now, where Governor DeSantis has taken great care to not take any make any comments about Donald Trump, and his inauguration just happened a few days ago. He, is very friendly with all the conservatives, many figures who are in the Trump camp. He's friendly with them. Many figures in the
Hmm.
wider Republican Party, he's friendly with them. He's shown
Hmm.
himself to be I wouldn't say a charismatic leader, but I think he's shown himself to be a very effective leader. I think in the wake
Hmm.
of COVID, people have recognized that DeSantis' leadership of Florida has, brought people to Florida. People are moving to Florida. Florida seems to be more of a dynamic state right now, much
Fair.
in the way that Texas was back in the day. It still is, I would say. And so
Yeah,
that's
but I
why
mean,
people are looking at DeSantis as maybe this guy should run for president.
and younger leadership, right? It always sort of
Absolutely. Yeah, and he
matters. Like,
presents that presidential figure. He will, he unlike Donald Trump, he will take on the media, but he does not get into the dirt with the media. He's not, tweeting sort of nasty things about the media. But if the media
hmm,
tries to, put out lies about him, he will fight back. And that's kind of what people are looking for, is somebody who's not tweeting like Donald Trump, somebody who's not as, down in the dirt like Donald Trump.
hmm,
But somebody who can still present that presidential sort of, above it all leadership, statesman like feel. And that's what they're
hmm,
getting from DeSantis. Again, maybe from afar right now. It remains to be seen what his prospects will be like if he gets into the debate stage. Once he gets into the
hmm,
primary stage, whether people will actually vote for him. But
hmm.
it's as far as the wider party, most Republicans who are sort of not they're not worshiping Trump. The Republicans who aren't worshiping Trump are looking to Ron DeSantis as the next great hope.
It's interesting, right? It's interesting that how things have changed within the. But let's go from the Republicans to the Democrats, right? The Democrats have stopped behaving like they're the party in power.
Yes.
So there is Biden, who wants to believe that he's the party in power, and then there is the far left Democrats that they are trying to basically become activists within their own establishment. And
Yeah, this is the typical Democrat mode. The famous Simpsons joke about the Democratic Party motto being "We hate ourselves and we don't know how to govern." And
yeah,
so but this is funny because these are similar accusations are also flying across the Republican side. So this is usually what happens when you're in power. is
No,
that
this is
you're
this is that famous monologue, right? That Will McAvoy has in the first season of Newsroom. That where he's asked the left and the liberal, left and the right. They says about freedom, what makes America great, freedom and freedom. And then the other guy says like, if liberals are so awesome, why do they keep losing every time? And
right.
then and then he turns around to the right and is like, with a straight face, you're going to say America is the only country that has freedom when 165 out of 200 countries have freedom, right? So
Yeah.
it's the exceptionalism has taken sort of a weird sort of turn. And as someone who's I always make this joke, and I moved here in 2007. In 2007, when you talk to people, liberals, right, in 2007, when Letterman was ruling the roost on the waves, and Jay Leno was, Dick Cheney was Darth Vader, right? That's how
Yes.
they talked about, right?
Yeah.
Now Dick Cheney's daughter is the person taking on the Republican establishment. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how far we've come in 15 years. And the
Yeah. This is
Democrats are
how.
applauding her.
Yeah. This is how quickly things change, and these are, see, the thing in
Yeah,
Indian politics, what we see in Indian politics is, one day you're with the Congress party and the next day you're getting a ticket on the BJP party. So
correct.
people switch parties very quickly in India, and it's understood. People who are previously hating a figure will say, okay, well, he's coming over
Yeah.
now, we need him, we'll vote for him. Here what
But
happens is the parties are so strong that
hmm,
that people can't really switch parties. But then this is why the people always in the Democrat Party and the Republican Party will say, well, this is the party of Reagan or this is the party of JFK, right? They
mhm,
hearken back to figures, and so that way they focus on the values more here. Whereas in India, the grab for power is a lot more naked. Whereas in America, you have to justify why you're changing your stance. So I think with people like figures like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and some of these Republicans who have been alienated by Trump, it's really hard for them to stay in the party, but it's really hard for them to also switch parties and get a ticket on
hmm.
the Democrat Party.
Yeah, so what is interesting is, in India, the people who switch would be local MPs and stuff like that. Like,
Yes,
you would never have Yogi Adityanath or his protege suddenly go over to the Congress. At least not that I think, or vice versa. Like, Jairam Ramesh suddenly go to the BJ. I mean, I'm just throwing out examples, right? People
right.
who are very close to the Congress establishment and close to the, which is not to say it can't happen. Chidambaram also switched parties. Manishankar Iyer was once with Mamta Banerjee. It happens, but it's more likely to see at local MP levels and stuff, because that is also to say that at heart, a lot of issues that divide the parties in the center, in Delhi or Washington DC, they are not that divisive as local issues. So that is why
Yes.
it's easier for them to switch from this to this, because they can do it on basis of issues, right? So that is there. But then, where do you see the whole squad situation within the Democrats and stuff? Do you see, after Biden, the Democratic Party essentially headed for a vertical split, or no?
Uh, it depends. So what Joe Biden basically did was he presented
Mhm.
the most presentable face of the Democrat
Mm.
Party to the American public during the COVID era, during this era when people thought and believed that President Trump wasn't handling the crisis as well as he could have. And so Joe Biden probably was the only person who could have beaten Donald Trump because he was the most acceptable to the American
Mhm.
public. As sad as that sounds, because he's seems to be, he's very aged. He's as old as Trump, I think older. And I
Mhm.
think what's happened is that Joe Biden, again, if you talk to people in DC, they'll say,
Mhm.
well, back in the day, he used to be very pragmatic. He used to be very, smart about things. And that's why some of the far left has, criticized him for his crime bill and things like that before
Yeah.
he ran for president. But I think ultimately it comes down to the quest for power. So the Democrats, they're the far left, the progressives, they all held their nose because their goal was to defeat Donald Trump. Now that
Mhm.
Donald Trump is back in the news again, that's all this January 6th stuff, the investigations, the Mar-a-Lago raid. So as long as Donald Trump stays in the news, as long as this, nasty,
Yeah.
satanic figure almost for that party remains in the news, they will be cohesive unit because they can say we are fighting against the absolute worst person that we ever know.
That's right.
And so that is their guiding motive, and that's
So
where they will.
I have to tell
Yeah,
you this very funny thing. I was talking to someone, and what you said, about I was talking to someone in California, and they, with a straight face, they told me, what is the difference between Joe Biden and the Republicans? And I'm like, my God. I was like, I agree that Joe Biden is not completely to the left, but you can't tell me with a straight face that you think there is no difference between a Trump-led Republican Party and a Joe Biden. And it doesn't matter whether you agree with one or two. There is a remarkable difference. But America is split into such pockets, right? So I am guaranteeing you, if I go to some very far-right conservative in Texas, they're going to tell me about the same thing about some centrist Republican, and
Yeah.
maybe about John Kasich. Is like, oh, John Kasich endorsed Biden for president. So what is the difference between John Kasich and AOC, right? Which is, I mean, absolutely ridiculous. So, but
So
that's how
this is
that's how
actually,
the
yeah. So it's a good point that you make, and this is actually something that we're currently dealing with, even in the Senate, with my former
Mhm.
boss Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
Because now what's happened is that there's a lot of people in the Republican Party who, after the loss of November elections,
Hmm.
have basically turned on their own. So this is what you were talking about, even with the Squad turning on the Democrat Party. The
Right.
Republicans are showing that happening now, where they are turning on their own. They're turning on the leadership. They're saying, well, Mitch McConnell is at fault. Paul Ryan is at fault. And that's the real issue right here, which is
Right.
that things have devolved.
Paul
And
Ryan. Oh, people have
yeah,
forgotten Paul Ryan.
yeah. So the split is now currently in the Republican Party, at least, between the so-called establishment figures and the
Yeah.
so-called base figures. And so the same
Uh-huh.
split is there in the Democrats, but in the Democrats, they have their leaders are able to rally them together a lot more, a lot better
Mhm.
than the Republican Party, which is a lot more freedom, has a lot more divisiveness because of that. And so that's what's happening, is because of that loss. Basically,
Hmm.
everybody turned around and said, "Well, it's not really our fault. It's not that we weren't voted out, or it's not that the
Hmm.
rebuke was on us. The real fault is with the people with the money, the people in power, the people who are in the establishment, and so they need to be kicked out. And that's why you're seeing all the drama and the mess in the House currently, because that's where they
Hmm.
thought they have a chance to take down somebody from that they consider to be from the establishment. And this is a fight that's been brewing for the last 10 years. And
Mhm.
quite honestly, until we get somebody who's a unifying figure, and this is where, again, the hard right Republicans need to understand this. Donald Trump was not a unifying figure. He cast people out. There's no reason for Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and some of these Republicans to not be in the big tent, right? This is the Ronald Reagan party, was the party of the big tent Republicans. Everybody's together,
Absolutely.
everybody's going forward, and that unity is not there anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
And until that unity comes back, we are going to keep losing elections. I might actually be writing an op-ed on this. I think most likely we are headed for another defeat in 2024.
You think so? Wow.
I think so.
That's
Yeah, I think in 2 years. So basically, the I'll give you a preview of the next 2 years. Leader McCarthy has now
Hmm.
become Speaker McCarthy. That's
Hmm.
fine. So for the next 2 years, essentially in the House, what we're going to get, because the Republicans don't have a majority in the Senate, in the House, what you're going to get is a lot of investigations. They're going to try to call in Hillary Clinton, Hunter Biden. They're
Correct.
going to try to relitigate the 2020 election. They're going to try to relitigate COVID-19, Dr. Fauci, big tech.
Mhm.
And honestly, some of these things I understand. They're important issues. They should be
Correct.
talked about. But what's going to happen is much like when they tried to call in Hillary Clinton in 2016 and 2015. It's going to be a nothing burger. It's going to be a lot of infighting. It's going to be a lot of, this person isn't doing enough, that person isn't doing enough, and no progress is going to get made.
So, can I ask you something, Anang? Because to a lot of our viewers in India and who are not in US or attuned to US politics, they don't understand what the drama of what happened in the last 4 days, right? Why
Yeah.
were there 15 votes to get speaker, right? India, mein, there is another problem. Votes hote nahi hai. It is
Yeah.
unanimous consent always. Like
Yeah.
we try to have votes, but then it's unanimous consent, or we have shams like the Congress presidential election. So,
Yeah.
so can you
Just to give
explain
a
what happened? Yeah.
Yeah, just to give a 101 class on the United States Constitution and the system of
And
government.
one heads up, I'm
Yeah.
not saying कि इंडिया में presidential election में नहीं होते. I'm talking
Hote hai.
about
Yeah.
internal
Yes,
party votes.
internal, yes. So just to give people some idea of what's going on, and sort of you have to go back to the Constitution. So in the
Mhm.
US Constitution, there are 4 constitutionally named offices in the Constitution. Everything else sort of is separate. So you have the president, you have the vice
Mhm.
president, you have the president pro tem of the Senate, and then
Mhm.
you have the Speaker of the House. So Speaker of the
Mhm.
House is literally a constitutionally designated office. The Speaker of the House is the person who holds the majority in the House of Representatives, whichever party holds that majority. But so basically, the Speaker of the House, once a party gets into the majority in the election, the Congress is sworn in. The people in that party who have been elected to the House get together and vote for this person should be designated as the Speaker of the House, and so they have a
Okay.
vote. And it
Interesting.
always, by tradition, And
Yeah.
by the fact of history, it's always a person who is the leader of the party. It's never somebody. You can't have a Speaker of the House who is from the losing party, the party with the least number of members.
Hmm.
And so basically, this drama has happened because this has been brewing for the last, I would say, 10 years. So
Hmm.
John Boehner became Speaker of the House when the Republicans won in 2010, that 2010
Hmm.
election. So he was Speaker for 4 years. And then by 2014, there was another election where the Republicans won the Senate. And so now they won a huge majority in the House. They won a huge majority in the Senate. And in 2014, a lot of the Tea Party Republicans, as they were known at the time, the conservatives, did not like John Boehner. They said he was too friendly with Barack Obama. He was too eager for a deal. He was too compromising. And so we need to vote out John Boehner. So by 2015, mid 2015, John Boehner had had enough. So John Boehner invites the Pope to speak in the U.S. Congress, and after that, he basically in a press conference, tears up and says, "This is my last. I'm retiring. This is my last, thing that I'm going to be doing." And so once John Boehner retired, his lieutenant Kevin McCarthy, who was the whip, well, clearly it's his chance to move up in the ranks. But a lot of the conservative Republicans, the right wing Republicans, said no. We don't want another person who's too mainstream. He's too compromising. He's too
Hmm.
too much of an establishment figure. We want
Hmm.
somebody that is going to be a real conservative. And so they all ran to Paul Ryan and said, "You have to run for speaker, and we will vote for you for speaker." And
Hmm.
so that's how we got Paul Ryan as speaker.
Hmm.
Then cut to 3 years later, where Donald Trump is now president of the United States, and so all of these former Tea Party sort of like economic issues kind of Republicans have now turned into hard right MAGA type Republicans. They want to
Correct.
fight the culture war. They want to fight the border war. They want to fight all kinds of wars.
Okay.
And so now now Paul Ryan realizes that even he doesn't have the support, and so he decides to retire.
Goodness.
He decides to retire in after the 2018 election was over, where the Democrats won back the House. And
Mhm.
so Kevin McCarthy had basically from 2015 to 2022, he had
Hmm.
8 years to gain back the trust of these right wing Republicans.
Hmm.
But apparently he did not. And because in 2022, Republicans only gained, I believe, they only gained 9 seats in the House.
Correct.
So
Hmm.
they did not have that huge majority in the House.
Hmm.
Kevin McCarthy did not have the advantage that John Boehner did. So when John Boehner would get criticized by the right wing Republicans, the Tea Party Republicans, he would say, "Well, there's so many Republicans here; they're all going to vote for me. I don't need you." In that sense, so he was able to skirt by. But Kevin McCarthy, because of there was no red wave this year, he could not
Right.
rely on this new cadre of Republicans. And so these guys who are the MAGA wing Republicans, the Freedom Caucus, as they're called, decided that they were
Unbelievable.
gonna, run this rebellion, against him, and try to get some concessions out of him. That
Hmm.
maybe he would concede to a vote of no confidence just from one member. Maybe he would
Right.
concede to putting these, Freedom Caucus members on committee chairs or maybe even ranking chairs, things like
Hmm.
that. But
Hmm.
ultimately, it was inevitable that Kevin McCarthy would be the speaker. Like there was no way he was going to
Yes.
go away. He knew he had the votes. Six
Correct.
people can hold up the business of the House, but they definitely cannot, overturn the guy who was going to be speaker. So it was all about what concessions do you need? What concessions can he make? How can he get these people to vote for him?
Also, and it was, for me, you had the Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, all those people, right, holding up the thing. Now, but one interesting thing is there was this visual of ours, I think, what is it, Margie Taylor Greene or someone had Donald Trump on the phone
Yes,
and people
yes.
just looked away or something. So it's clearly that the concessions that were made were personal concessions, not on the behalf of Mr. Trump or so forth, right? So I think that is the difference. We can be sure that that is happening, that it's not that Mr. Trump is ruling the roost, it's that they themselves have taken positions which they want fulfilled.
Yeah, I think this is another issue, which is that Mr. Trump wants to look like Lalu Prasad Yadav. I am kingmaker. He wants to be seen as somebody who can affect the party, who can affect the votes. But quite honestly, he doesn't have a lot of say beyond the base, right? So he, like I said, again, 6 people. It wasn't 100 Republicans. It wasn't 50 Republicans. It was at most 6 to 7 Republicans who were basically saying that holding up the speaker's vote. And so that's kind of the indicative of what's really happening here. And again, just to be clear, like, this is politics. This is a land of wolves. This is a bloody business. Kevin McCarthy can turn around and say, I'm not going to concede anything now that he's speaker. It's totally in his, he's got the majority, so it's totally in his decision, up to him whether he wants to do that or not. But he also, it must be said, Kevin McCarthy spent all of the Trump years being very friendly with Donald Trump, being very friendly with the base, trying to make sure that he could shore up that support. And yet at the end, those people still, betrayed him and basically, held up this vote for many days. And so that's not going to be something that Kevin McCarthy is going to forget. Honestly, quite honestly, that's not something that even the Republicans who voted for Kevin McCarthy are going to forget. So this is, again, something to be said, that yes, they have the ability to do this. How this plays out in the next 2 years, like I said, it's going to be a lot of infighting. It's going to be a lot of backstabbing, and that's why I think we're headed for a defeat in 2024. Does not bode well. It's not a civil war, but it's close to that. It's close to that.
But that's a big concession you're making. So that basically the Democrats might just win in 2024. The only
By
reason they
default.
may lose,
Just like just like in the Kevin McCarthy, just like in the Kevin McCarthy election, right? This whole drama that's going on the House floor, the Democrats are sitting back and going, "Yeah, you want to, you want these guys to run the country." So that's all they have to do for the next 2 years is just sit back and say, shore up their, make some look good by doing nothing, basically. And that's what's going to be happening for 2024. Joe Biden can just say, "Look at this mess. Look at these people. They can't even figure out who they want as their leader."
Yeah, look at their life, look at their choices, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so okay, fascinating point. So let me move. This is a great pivot that I get, and we'll go back to it later. But let me go to Indian Americans in American politics. Right, it's been a good year for Indian Americans in American politics. Doesn't matter where you, because you. But here is the caveat that I would put. Right, how do you define? So now there have been Indian Americans who have been talking about issues that Indian American pertain to, and there have been Indian Americans who, when they are elected, they completely forget that there is sort of a expectation that the community has, because there's just so few of us, that there is people going to, and I'm not just saying Indian American citizens and stuff. It's simple things like the Eagle Act, right? We talk about how H1 students over here who are basically they're looking at 50 to 70-year wait times and stuff. And I always say that the cold response to this is, oh, they are not voters, right? But then you have Latino Congress people, right, talking about Latino issues who which pertain to family-based immigration and stuff. They're not voters as well. It's just a empathetic. It's just a recognition of that. Okay, I represent a community, and I've gone to the community to get me elected, to get me votes, to get me finances. Do I talk about the issues of the community? So let me ask you a two-part question. First, is the latter happening? Are they talking? And second, how do you view, are Indian Americans only coming at local levels, or now are more and more coming at a national level as well?
I think the national level thing is yet to be seen beyond, Vice President Kamala Harris. I mean, all full credit to her. She made that happen, however she made that happen. But yeah, I think that there is a disconnect between the diaspora and the wider community. And that's really this is the joke that you will definitely laugh at. If there's an Agrawal community in DC, then very soon there'll be two Agrawal communities, right? If there's a Guju community, there'll be very soon two Guju communities, or Bengal. And I've seen this, right? So whenever Indian Americans get together, or Indians get together, diaspora Indians, there usually ends up being, infighting. As speaking about infighting, there usually ends up being some kind of disunity. And so then, it's the joke. It's like, a Jewish guy gets, stranded on an island, and then when he's rescued, they see that he's built 2 synagogues, and they go, "Why'd you build 2?" He goes, "Well, that's the one I go to, and that's the one I wouldn't be caught dead going inside," right? So we have this sort of status chasing that happens in our community a lot, and I think that's kind of holding us back, because the unity that you see in other communities, there is status chasing in other communities, but generally the unity you see in other communities does not translate well into the diaspora communities. Apart from, like I said, some small pockets may be there. So I think that's the first issue, is that beyond the disconnect from the elites who are in politics versus the actual diaspora or the base exists. And so that's the first disconnect. The second disconnect is, yeah, you have Indian Americans who come here, assimilate very well, and basically then choose to either be Republicans or Democrats. And then because they've assimilated so well, they leave behind the diaspora until and unless there's a time to get votes. Then they come out. So Kamala Harris, great example. Her campaign, she basically campaigned as a left-wing Democrat senator. All the issues that she cared about were left-wing Democrat issues, mainstream issues. She very much portrayed herself as as an African American mixed race person. And then when it was time to get votes, when she was sort of faltering in the primaries, then she brought in Mindy Kaling to sort of show her her Indian side roots.
And make dosas.
Yeah, and make dosas. And again, maybe, I've heard from people that she did actually, when she was running in California for the state, again, local level, she was emphasizing her Indian roots. But the point is, it's indicative of how, a lot of Indian Americans behave.
Yeah, because what I was saying, right? Like
Yeah.
somehow they get elected with Indic roots and stuff,
Yes.
and then suddenly forget, and now suddenly want to pander to every other community that isn't Indian American, and forget, and they're like, "Arey, ye to apne hi hai, so you can absolutely consider me." What the
So
hell,
that
man?
goes back to the status thing, where wealthy
Yeah.
Indian Americans who are donors, rather than caring about, so other donors say, well, these are the issues I care about. I have a foundation, I have a nonprofit, I have a charity, and so I'm donating to this person because they care about these issues. They go and have meetings. What happens on the Indian American side, most likely, and this is something I've seen for sure, is what we end up doing is, well, we just want our name out there, right? We want to be
Yeah.
seen. We want the selfie with Kamala, so we're gonna give money.
Yeah.
And we don't really care about the issues. Yeah, sure. She sounds good. Just they don't care about the issues as much as sort of other
Yeah,
donors do.
I agree. So my question is, there are so many Indo-American celebrities, chefs, food bloggers. So how many of them, they talk about Black Lives Matter? They talk about, and which is great.
Yeah.
They relate. They talk about issues. Excellent. But how many of them have talked about what the Indian American people are facing? If there is a kid on age 4, he stays in US for 20 years. They talk about Dreamers and DACA, right? But
Yeah.
they don't. The same people will not talk about this. And I'm like, this affects your own community, right? Is your relation to your community just related towards butter chicken and naan, or sorry, chicken tikka masala, as it's
Right.
called in US, right? Is that the only relation that you have to your community?
So yeah, I mean, so this is
Or
absolutely
naan
something.
bread, I'm sorry, not
Yeah,
naan,
naan
naan
bread or
bread.
chai tea, that's also
Chai
another
tea
one.
latte, yes,
Yeah,
that's
so I
right.
think this is something that we definitely as a community need to move beyond. And I think I've written an
Yeah.
op-ed on this as well, that
Mhm.
generally when we engage with the wider American community, it always ends up
Mhm.
being on these sort of very superficial cultural issues, and then beyond that, we don't really care to defend our community. We don't really care to defend our own sense of being and self-worth. And I think that's really, really important, is that doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter which Indian community you're with. I
Mhm.
think it's very important for that unity to happen. And I think that's part of what I think my argument is, that I think we do need to see more Indian Americans blogging, podcasting, caring about, things that Indians care about. And then also on the donor side, I think there does need to be a lot more political awareness, and donors do need to get together and form these pacts. And I think this is the other part of especially with the Eagle Act. I think a lot of Indian Americans by default tend to be Democrats. Totally fine. Good for you. Go do that. Go vote. Go donate however
Mhm.
you want. But I think
Right.
as far as the diaspora issues and the community issues, I think there absolutely needs to be some level of bipartisanship. And I
Hmm.
think that's really, really what's important right now, is that that bipartisanship usually does not happen. Usually people, self-segregate into their communities,
Hmm.
and then end up just voting for whichever side they want quietly. And because that bipartisanship hasn't happened, things like the Eagle Act, things like the issues that Indians care about aren't happening.
Hmm.
And even like I said, look at the politicians, Ami Bera, Krishnamurthy, Ro Khanna. They're good on some issues, but very, very easily they'll be swayed by the squad, by Ilhan Omar, to vote for resolutions that end up hurting India, or end up making India look bad. in these kind of resolutions and bills. So I think that's
Mhm.
where we do need to lobby these folks. We do need to tell these people, hey, you have a base, you have people who are standing behind you and are willing to affect your public image, because we tend to be silent more than other communities on these issues.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But so I think more than the local congressmen, more than the local Congress folks and senators and stuff, I think where we need to is, if Indian industrialists are donating, if Indian tech folks are donating, we need to talk about it. Second, what I've seen the issue with Indian American communities is, we take the color or the ideology of the state we are in. So I've talked to Indian Americans in California, and they'll sound more like California Democrats than even Democrats will.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we're do this, we're Bay Area, Silicon Valley. I'm like, okay, calm down. I was like, I was like 5 years ago, you didn't. I was like, I know you. 5 years ago,
Yes.
I know where you were, right?
Yeah.
So what is the source of your belief? I mean, great if you've evolved, right? But if you don't have a coherent explanation, you're only sounding this to sound in place, right? Then that's an issue, right? Why are you not talking about a lot of issues that you yourself were talking about 5 years ago, right? So um, uh, you have Pramila Jaipal in Seattle, Washington, who is an Indian American. She rarely talks about issues. She'll talk about more issues in India and talk about journalists and activists in India than Indian Americans and what they're facing here. And it's
Yeah.
it's just unbelievable. Like,
Because she knows that'll get her press, and
yeah,
she knows that will get her attention from
and
the people she needs to get attention from, and that's the point.
absolutely. And to play devil's advocate, weirdly enough, she's the only congressperson who's come out strongly for the Eagle Act. By the way,
Yeah.
she's
Yeah, because
and so
well,
that's the dichotomy.
yeah, and I think Pramila Jaipal, I think she recently got in trouble. I think after the elections, maybe she got in trouble for criticizing Democrats' leadership, and she had to walk it back. There was a whole little bit of a
Mhm.
drama. So that's the point: is that these people are not immune to, they're not immune to being lobbied, and I think that's really the case here.
Yeah.
There. Let's be real. There's a Pakistan lobby. There's a Middle
Yes.
East lobby. There's every kind of lobby that there's a China lobby, right? But I don't know if there's an India lobby. I don't know if there are people, you know what I mean? Like, obviously the Indian government, connects with the US government and all that, but I don't know if there's a soft power lobby like the way that other
Not
countries
that I
have.
think of. Yeah.
And I think that's really the important part, is that once that environment, that ecosystem is created, that isn't, and I think it requires both. It requires people who are Indian American, who are in touch with the culture here, and it requires people in the diaspora who will care a lot more about the diaspora issues here. And I think it requires a union of both sides, and that's what's
Mhm.
not happening right now. Is that,
Yeah.
as you said, the people who come here assimilate so quickly, and then their kids, at this point, it's been 20, 30, 40 years, their kids have grown up and they're so assimilated that, yeah, like there's, I'm sure you've seen this, Indian kids in Texas have Texan accents, kids in Georgia have
No,
Georgian
that's not
accents.
even a problem. Most of them are not aware of the issues. So
Right.
I joke with this. I've joked with this about with my friends, my wife all the time. That where I get into trouble is I have to advocate about India to a lot of Indian Americans here, and America
Yeah.
to a lot of Indians in India, right? And I get
Yeah.
bashed from both sides,
Yes. Yes.
because someone was talking about, the Indian embassy is XYZ and inefficient. I was like, do you know what Indian citizens in US have to go through when it comes to visa, when it
Yeah.
comes to green card H1? And they're like, no, we have no idea. Our parents never told us.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah.
blame them, because ultimately there has to be in education. There are ways. So the voices in Indian voices in, if you want to write an op-ed in any leading paper, right, you can go and either bash the Indian government on Kashmir, and then
Yep.
you'll get a place.
Yep.
You can write nonsense about how freedom of expression is threatened about India, then you'll get a space.
Or
Or you can
trust.
write about yoga, Bollywood, and everything, you'll get. If
Yeah.
you want to talk about what the Indian folks are facing here, Americans get space to write, but Indians don't get space to write. If there is someone on an H1 who wants to write, and most of the people are so worried that, so that they write, and then they end up writing anonymously, right?
Right.
So that's
Right.
the unfortunate thing.
Yeah, the only answer to that is we have to create our own space, and part of this is
Yeah,
what we're doing, is we're creating that space, that there's
absolutely.
nobody's going to give it to us, nobody's going to afford it to us. I certainly have no interest in writing for the New York Times or the
Yeah.
Washington Post, and so I'm happy to create my own space. I'm happy to create my own messaging. And I think this is why the cratering of media, the creation of these, sort of citizen journalists, the fact that you can have, TikTok accounts or YouTube accounts or Twitter accounts is, that's really where you're going to be able to move the
and
conversation.
citizen journalist is not Anang's clever way of pointing out the issue that we raised with immigrations.
Yeah.
but but no, so see, that's unfortunately the thing. Culturally, I think there is a huge change where Indian American culture now is a part of the mainstream culture.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have stereotypical, I mean, you will have certain, people saying certain things, but food is a part of it and stuff like that. But it has to be a multi-pronged effort, right?
Yeah, it has to be, and even the food thing is what you see when white people talk about Indian culture. I certainly don't get offended if they go, "Oh, I love butter chicken or chicken tikka masala," but I think when it's people who are sort of in the elite, who again, the Pramila Jaipal level people, the people in Congress, or people who sort of pretend to be activists and pretend to be a lot more informed and enlightened, and all they can talk about when it comes to India is just basic stuff, Modi, this, that, and the other thing that has no relationship. And that's where my sort of anger and frustration comes out, because it's clear they have no understanding of Indian culture, the Indian diaspora, or even how Indian society works. And this is the blindness that happens on both sides, right? What is it? I think somebody mentioned this, that liberals in India, the left-wing sort of elite liberals in India, use terms that are very clearly American, right? So one term that I've heard is founding fathers, which is like, there's no founding fathers in India. Okay, we were not founded; we were already there. So that term I've seen
These
used
days,
by
I have heard people not on the left also say stuff like Jesus on podcast, and I'm like,
yeah, yeah. I mean,
"Kya baat kar rahe ho,
yeah,
yaar?"
it's in my
I was like,
vocabulary also. So, but I
no,
know
no,
what you
but
mean.
you stay here.
I
This
say
is
here, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
talking about people very much in the heart of Delhi and
yeah.
Bombay who have used this.
Yes, that people in Delhi and Bombay who watch Netflix, who watch Amazon, who are
Huh,
only watch American TV, English TV. Yeah,
huh,
and then they behave like Americans, and their mindset then is in that dichotomy, the binary of the Republican
yeah.
Democrat binary. And that's the
Hmm,
problem in America as well, is that people who are activists or even just normal politically minded people look at, oh,
hmm,
well, Modi is like a Trump, or clearly
hmm.
this person is like this, and it's like, has no bearing. And so I think that's the first sort of hurdle that has to be cleared, that first level of misinformation that has to be cleared. That
Agreed.
you can't just compare everything to American politics.
No, and you can't, and you won't be able to, right? Like
No.
it's the the reality is more complicated than what you give credence to. And how do you deal with it? वो अब देखना है. But I am convinced of one thing is that in the long term scenario of what we talk about, our field, the ideological battle, this, that, there are some very short term solutions that Indian Americans have to look. And what you said, the rise of people like Raja Krishnamurti, Ami Bera, like, across the political spectrum, people from, I think, Neeraj Antani in Ohio as well,
Yes.
at local level. So, I mean, across Republicans, and you have that voice that is coming. In I stay in a district that is dominated, that is the Texas 22nd, is has a lot of Republican, sorry, not Republican, it's a Republican district with a lot of Indian American population, and Indian Americans have tried to fight on Democrat side, and the Indian vote has shifted towards the Republican side. So it's not like they're only voting for an Indian face there. You
Yes.
need someone to talk. The Republican Party has locally talked to Indian Americans on their issues, and they have voted, right? So how does that split happen? I don't know. We'll have to see. But it's a long battle. Yeah.
Yeah, that lobbying has to be done not just with the Indian community, it has to be done with the American politicians as well. And it's a great example. Senator John Cornyn, who I know very well, he's very receptive to Indian American issues. When he campaigns, he has a website in Hindi and I think other languages as well. And so he's a good example of that successful. He knows there's a huge Indian constituency in Texas, so he talks to the community, he talks to people here. He may not always vote how people want, but he absolutely is receptive to the efforts that people have made in Texas on Indians' behalf, on the community's behalf. And I think that's really the important part, is that
Hmm,
you do have to make that effort. If they don't know you're out there, they're not going to care that much, right? So
hmm,
and I think Eagle Act is a good example. Even though it failed, it
hmm,
was very obvious people were calling congressmen, they were calling their representatives, they were calling, tweeting about it and things like that. And I think that's really what's important. That's the first step that's needed. But
Hmm.
there has to be a continued effort. That effort has to, like I said, be made with dollars. It has to be made with phone calls, with accounts, with all kinds of raising awareness and engagement with the American political community as well.
Absolutely. Fascinating points, Sarang. I think it's a good point to start wrapping up on. I think you raised important point. अगर इसका sequel तो एक बनता है, maybe after we'll definitely. I think Anang, we should do this make this a regular feature, that especially when it comes to elections and stuff,
Absolutely.
you and I get together and do a before and after podcast for sure for American elections. But then apart from this, we'll do a regular feature on the Indian American community, their political outreach and what is changing. I can guarantee you, with 2024 being a Fed national election year, presidential election year, there is a lot of moving and shaking that's going to happen post October and November. All roads will lead to Iowa and New Hampshire exactly 1 year from now.
Yeah.
And
And
exactly 1 year
Gujarat.
from now, and Gujarat.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, because my God, yeah, we'll have the Indian election campaign, national election campaign kicking off as well. So it's going to be a very interesting 18 months, 24-month period for people like us, podcasters, talkers, and stuff. But we'll be here talking about it all. But before we go, I think we have this tradition on Mind Podcast, as you know, of giving recommendations, non-political, but things you've watched, read, seen, anything. Could be streaming shows, movies, books. So any recommendations you have for our listeners
Well,
this week?
having just gone to Vilayat for the first time, I went to London for the first time this past Thanksgiving. So my recommendation would be, I'm currently reading this book called Six Wives, which is about the six wives of Henry VIII. And there's actually now a musical called Six. So if you're into musicals, you can look up the album on YouTube. It's called Six, and it's apparently also playing on Broadway. Or off Broadway, probably in New York City. So I think that's a good recommendation. And I think the best movie of last year that I've seen, I mean, apart from the usual Batman and those kind of things,
Yeah.
I would say the movie called Tar, Tar, with not what's her name, Kate Blanchett, playing an orchestra conductor who sort of slowly loses grip with reality and with her own self. And it's one of those very actory movies, but I would say it's better than most of those kind of actory movies where nothing really happens and you're like, "Ye kya ho raha hai?" It's made by a protege of Stanley Kubrick, so it's a very Kubrickian film of a person
Fascinating.
dealing with the massive issues in their own life and how it's unraveled. So I think it's probably the best
Fascinating.
movie of last year.
Oh, excellent recommendations. I go the other way, completely the other way. I saw a Netflix documentary called Mumbai Mafia Police versus the Underworld,
Oh,
about
okay.
the
I need to
encounters.
watch
We
that.
just released 2 days ago.
Yeah.
I'm almost done with it, but close enough to where I can recommend people to watch it, because I forget how less people have known about this menace that happened, right? This was 25, 30 years ago.
Only from
And people,
movies, and I remember the
yeah,
TCA's guy being
and they did
assassinated and all that. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
You had him, you had, I think, Mukesh Duggal, the guy who made movie Gopi Kishan, he was
Yes.
assassinated.
Yes.
um Rakesh Roshan was, Rajiv Rai, the guy who made Mohra Gupt, he was
Yes.
attacked, and
Yes.
he went to London and never came back, or only came back a few years ago. So there are various situations. Hrithik Roshan too. I mean, Preeti Zinta was threatened. You can, and movies, Bollywood, आजकल बॉलीवुड की बात हो रही, you have to see how bad it was in the 90s with the
Yeah.
underworld ruling the roast, and the Filmfare Awards, and how they were loaded one way. So I would recommend watching it, and then see, these gangster movies over glorify gangsters and stuff because they have to have one liners on them. But it wasn't as easy as people. I have had families in Bombay who have told me what they had to go through, where they would get threatening calls and so forth. Ki
Yeah.
ye packet, ye kar do, ye kar do, wo kar do. And watch it. It's deeply, it hits you in a very different way when you have thought this way. So uh, watch it and then read about it, in that what really was it. S. Hussain Zaidi has written a wonderful book called Black Friday. So I would recommend watching that and then reading Black Friday about the Bombay blast, and then watching Anurag Kashyap's movie The Black Friday, where
Right.
KK Menon has given him and Pawan Malhotra, fabulous performance. on it. Again, there are a lot of lessons to be learned. Not I don't agree with everything that's said in the book. I don't agree with everything that's shown in the movie. But that's what the movies and books are about, right? If you agree with everything they're said, then you're not going to have discussions about it. So
Absolutely.
those would be my recommendations. But apart from that, I mean, thank you, Anang, for joining me on
Thank
Mind
you for having
Podcast.
me.
This
I
has been
appreciate it.
brilliant.
Yeah.
And we'll be doing one very soon, guys. We'll be back. Please write to us questions, comments, thoughts, any annoyances that you have, grievances that you have with us, topics we didn't cover, write to us. Please follow Anang on all the social media network. We'll tag him on and post his Twitter handle as well. So please follow him there and subscribe to his channel as well. Till then, we'll be back next week with more on Mind Makers. It's goodbye from both of us. Thank you.
Thank you.